Today in the Daily Dose, pirate radio and the birth of a nation. During the Second World War, as Germany threatened the island nation of Great Britain with imminent and repeated invasion and assault attempts, the Royal Artillery built upon its Latin motto ubique, or everywhere, in their defense of their homeland, including sea forts rising formidably out of the ocean at the Thames estuary and harbor mouth, along with other towers in the North Sea, intent on repelling Nazi air and sea attacks whenever they arose. For those assigned to such claustrophobic sea forts, each fort was manned by an approximate 200 Royal Marines and Royal Navy personnel who worked around the clock on a 3-shift schedule per day. Sea fort crews navigated 14-foot wide thoroughfares where bored men took brisk walks for exercise, including the magazine and a look at the engine that pumped fresh water from its own artesian well drilled into springs beneath the seafloor. Descending 7 stories from top to bottom, with multiple floors completely underwater, the Thames Estuary Towers, collectively known as His Majesty's Rough Towers, consisted of 7 structures connected by steel bridges, each tower weighing in at 750 tons of reinforced concrete, each bristling with searchlights, anti-aircraft batteries, and hard-mounted surface-to-ship artillery emplacements. Equally important was the generation of electric power used for lighting, machines and vital equipment, artillery and anti-aircraft searchlights, the later operating nightly for the purpose of coastal defense against air and sea strikes intent on raining death and destruction on the greater London area. Army and Navy personnel shared a common mess hall, while officers and enlisteds alike concocted odd routines and games to keep themselves in good physical and psychological shape. Dinner became the highlight of each man's day, followed closely by breakfast and afternoon tea. And while life on a sea fort was routinely monotonous and confining, their defensive importance came alive each time the Germans threatened an attack on the British mainland. Now known as a remarkable example of cooperation between different military branches, anti-aircraft detachments were manned by the Royal Engineers in 8-hour shifts that witnessed men scouring the skies and seas for the approach of enemy ships and planes.
Hold it! Right, now run away.
Traverse. Elevation. Sight.
Down! Down half! Right 6! Ha!
And now the final test. Sea alarm. Attack from the sea. The watch on dash from their shelter and man the heavy coastal defense guns. The watch in reserve rush from the barrack room.
degrees. Right 8. Drop off.
On target! Fire!
Known as soldiers on stilts, after the war, British sea forts continued to be manned during the early days of the Cold War, and while their existence was no longer kept top secret, every fortnight a new garrison took over the peacetime task of cleaning and maintaining guns, searchlights, and radar installations. And while these systems acted as advanced defensive measures against Nazi aggression, during the early post-war years, the same facilities and equipment acted more like lifeboat stations ready to help ocean-going ships in distress, morphing from the guardians of London to the sentinels of ships during their ingress and egress from the Thames River. But as the Cold War dragged on, so did the rising threat of mutually assured destruction by ever-growing nuclear arsenals on both sides of the conflict, which in turn made coastal seafort defense systems a bygone thing of the past. Many were torn down or left to decay under harsh ocean conditions, until the British rock invasion of the 1960s breathed new life into the rusting platforms of a war and a threat long relegated to the annals of military history. It was the time of the Beatles, the Kinks, and the Rolling Stones, and after stodgy BBC officials refused to broadcast the new sound except for 1 hour a week, millions of young Brits tuned to pirate radio stations concealed aboard rogue ships at sea, World War II-era sea forts, as well as old land-based forts in an ongoing tap dance to evade detection by British authorities. One pirate radio entrepreneur was Roy Bates, an enterprising World War II veteran who possessed a fearless lust for adventure. In 1965, Roy Bates commandeered a sea fort from a competing pirate radio station in what has been called the Wild West of the North Sea, setting up what would become Britain's first 24-hour pirate radio station. Due to the sea fort's location off the coast of Essex, England, Bates named his station Radio Essex. Shortly after Radio Essex's creation, the British government passed the Broadcasting Offences Act of 1967 that made all pirate radio stations illegal, forcing Bates to shut down or face the imminent threat of arrest. True to his swashbuckling nature, however, rather than surrender to British law, Bates seized another sea fort outside of UK territorial jurisdiction. The platform, also known as Ruff's Tower, was located on a sandbar roughly 7 miles off the coast of Sussex, England, and on September 2nd of 1967, on his wife's 38th birthday, Roy Bates announced his newly minted principality and independent nation-state of Sealand, at the same time crowning himself Prince Bates, while his wife Joan was crowned a princess. Along with their 2 children, Michael and Penny, Prince Roy and Princess Joan set up residence on Sealand, while the sheer novelty of their lifestyle became a constant source of entertainment for Brits back home on the mainland. When asked if ridicule from the mainland about his self-anointed title annoyed him, Prince Roy replied,
"Not at all, no. As a matter of fact, I can understand this. But princes, dukes and lords are not very democratic, you know. Originally somebody grabbed something, and from then on, they're a prince or they're a duke or they're a lord or their descendants are. No, they're not elected democratically."
By the time Sealand was formed, Joan and Roy Bates had been married for 21 years, and when asked by a reporter how it was possible to remain glamorous under conditions found on Sealand, Joan replied, "We're quite comfortable here. I have all the things I need, like brushes and makeup." And when asked what she missed most about the mainland, that the one luxury she missed the most was a hairdresser. 16-year-old Penny was less convinced about Sealand's amenities than her mother, citing freezing cold weather and the lack of electricity, while the process of flushing a toilet required a person to drop a bucket and a line 80 feet down to the ocean before hoisting up enough seawater to get the job done. Despite the inconveniences, the Bates family courted big dreams for their sovereign nation, including a financial tax haven like Switzerland, Bermuda, or the Cayman Islands, as well as an offshore casino and a host of other less reputable ventures. They also fashioned a state flag, a national anthem, and a national motto, "From the sea, freedom," a currency and a national stamp, which unfortunately was only honored in Belgium after special approval. After fending off rivals and buccaneers during their early years as a nation, the Bates also remained a nuisance to the British government, who sent a warning to the nation-state family when a team of Royal Engineers blew up a similar sea fort within eyesight of Ruff's Tower. A later attempt to dislodge the Bates family from their sovereign ground again threatened the family in August of 1978, when a group of German and Dutch lawyers and diamond merchants launched a coup d'etat for the purpose of establishing an offshore casino. Arriving by helicopter with a film crew, the group surprised Michael before binding his arms and feet forcing all the Bates to surrender their claims to Sealand and flee to the safety of mainland Europe. 3 days later, the Bates men returned by helicopter with a group of hired muscle, successfully staging a counter-coup that saw them retake ownership of their man-made nation-state. Shortly after their principality was safely returned to them, all the plotters were released, save for a man named Putz, who was made to clean bathrooms and make coffee, until the would-be plotters agreed to pay a $37,000 fine for treason, which subsequently resulted in Putz's release. In the early 2000s, the Bates family partnered with some fringe internet entrepreneurs with dreams of turning Sealand into an offshore data haven, where they ran a number of gambling and porn sites, while the Bates family drew the line on hosting an organ transplant company intent on harvesting and selling human organs to wealthy yet morally bankrupt patients in need. All ventures failed dismally, and after Prince Roy's death on October 9, 2012, followed by Princess Joan's passing on March 10, 2016, Michael's grown sons James and Liam continued to run the sovereign nation of Sealand as they attempted to harness the power of the internet in various feats of self-promotion. While the surviving Bates family members refused to disclose the size of Sealand's national debt or yearly budget appropriations, the grandsons of Princess Joan and Prince Roy appear to be making a reasonable living through the online sale of noble titles, where $30 will make you a lord or a lady, while $600 will make you a Sealand Duke or Duchess, making the nation-state of Sealand a David and Goliath story of resistance much larger than the nation itself. And there you have it, pirate radio and the birth of a nation, today in the Daily Dose. Get your nerd on with the Daily Dose, and if you enjoyed today's episode, share the link with a friend or colleague so that they too can learn something new every day.